My grease-stained apron felt like a second skin. It had absorbed the sweat of countless Friday nights, the phantom scent of pepperoni clinging to its fibers, even after a week's worth of washing. I ran my hand over the worn fabric, feeling the familiar bumps where stray mozzarella chunks had fused themselves in past splatters. Another night of making pizza at Sal's. Another symphony of bubbling cheese and sizzling sausage playing out on the chipped Formica countertop. That's when the order came through on the computer, number 825. It was always a little unnerving when those numbered orders popped up this late at night. It was usually reserved for late-night weirdos or corporate catering gigs with names like The Synergy Group that sounded more suited to some alien business entity than Staten Island. This one had no name attached, just the number and an address in some gated community out past the toll booths. But what really set this order apart wasn't the location. It was the instructions. No extra sauce or light on the peppers, none of that usual customer gibberish. It read like an architectural blueprint. Base, organic tomato, San Marzano variety, spread in concentric circles, starting from center with an even 3mm border around each subsequent ring. Cheese, mozzarella di bufala campagna, shredded fine and applied in 2 overlapping layers. First layer at a density of 75 grams per square centimeter. Second layer at 60 grams per centimeter squared. Pepperoni, sliced thin, arranged in a Fibonacci spiral starting from the outermost ring. Density, 1 slice every 12 millimeters along the spiral path. The rest was equally precise. Sliced mushrooms forming an equilateral triangle pattern. Green olives meticulously placed like stars on a celestial map. And finally, 1 whole roasted garlic bulb, halved lengthwise, positioned at the apex of the pepperoni spiral. It felt less like ordering food and more like commissioning some kind of edible sculpture. I chuckled to myself. Some rich jerk's idea of fun. But I was already halfway through prepping a dough ball, my fingers instinctively netting it into that perfect Sal's thickness. Not too thin, not too thick. Just right for holding the voluminous amount of toppings this thing demanded. The precision in those instructions, it fueled me. This wasn't some drunken college kid throwing pineapple where it didn't belong. This was a challenge. I spread the San Marzano sauce with laser focus, each ring of crimson like a segment of an orange, sliced too thin to be eaten, but perfect for admiring. The mozzarella went down first as fluffy white snow, then again in a more delicate dusting. My fingers moving almost unconsciously now, years of slinging pies etching themselves into muscle memory. The pepperoni spiral was the trickiest part. I laid out each slice on parchment paper and used a ruler to mark off the Fibonacci sequence before meticulously arranging them onto the pizza like tiny red suns orbiting a molten core. The garlic bulb went in last, its pale, fleshy half-moon gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights of the kitchen. I slid it into the 700-degree inferno, the heat instantly licking at the edges of my vision as I leaned forward to watch the transformation. The dough puffed up like a sleeping dragon, waking with a hiss, then settled back down as the cheese melted and bubbled over the pepperoni's crimson sheen. The garlic bulb released its perfume, sharp, sweet, almost intoxicating, filling the cramped kitchen with an aroma that was both familiar and alien. And then it happened. A faint hum vibrated through the floorboards beneath my feet, a low thrumming like a tuning fork struck against bone. It intensified as I watched, emanating from the pizza itself. The pepperoni started to glow, not just greasy sheen under the heat lamp, but an internal luminescence that pulsed with each beat of the strange rhythm vibrating in the air. The mozzarella turned milky white, and then began to swirl like a miniature galaxy within its own crusty frame. And finally, as if molested by some unseen hand, the roasted garlic bulb at the apex of the spiral unfurled, splitting open along its pale curve, revealing not fleshy innards, but a single perfectly formed eye staring at me from within the molten cheese and pepperoni sea. It blinked. A slow, deliberate blink that seemed to suck all the heat out of the kitchen in one go, leaving behind an unnatural chill despite the oven's roar. Then it spoke, not with words, but with a feeling pressed directly into my skull, like a thought rather than a sound. "You have done well." I stood there, spatula frozen in my hands, halfway to its resting place on the counter, staring at the pizza as if I just sprouted another head myself. The eye blinked again, and this time it wasn't alone. More were forming in the molten cheese around it, a dozen tiny orbs of white light blooming like stars across the surface of my creation. Then, with a final pulse that rattled the metal racks above me, the pizza went dark. Just another pepperoni pie, glowing faintly in the heat as if nothing had happened at all, except for the sudden prickling sensation on the back of my neck and the overwhelming urge to check behind me. I took a deep breath, trying to convince myself it was exhaustion mixed with too many garlic fumes. I returned my attention to the spatula, ready to slide that weird pizza into its box and send it out on its way. But as my fingers brushed against the crust, something else pulsed beneath them. Not heat this time, but a faint vibration like a hummingbird's wings beating just outside of hearing range. I looked down at the pepperoni spiral. The eye in the center was gone now, replaced by nothing more than a roasted bulb of garlic. "Garlic," I muttered, staring at the pizza box like it held some arcane riddle instead of a late-night snack. It was probably just my imagination playing tricks on me after 12 hours standing over an infernal oven. Sal's wasn't exactly known for its customer service finesse. We were more, "get your slice and get out," than "we appreciate your feedback." But I figured a pizza with this many instructions deserved some extra effort, even if it meant braving the gated community of Oak Haven Estates, Staten Island's answer to Versailles. This was where McMansions sprouted like mushrooms after a rainstorm, and every lawn was manicured into an unnatural green perfection. The drive out there usually took about 20 minutes on a good night. Tonight, though, something felt off from the moment I pulled onto Highland Boulevard. The usual Friday night din of car horns and screeching tires seemed muted, swallowed by some unseen blanket of quietude that pressed against my windshield like damp gauze. Streetlights flickered with an unsettling rhythm, not just on-off, but a pulsing strobe effect that made the world around me feel like it was breathing in time. Then there were the trees lining the road. They were leafless skeletons, bare branches scraping at the sky as they always did this late into the fall, but they seemed too still. Not a single twig swayed despite the wind that had picked up, gently nudging my car around like it was trying to steer me off course. I passed familiar landmarks. The boarded-up strip mall with its faded neon sign advertising Luigi's Pizza, rest in peace, Mrs. DeLuca's petunia patch, even the abandoned playground where kids used to climb on rusty monkey bars shaped like dinosaurs, that were now just twisted metal grotesqueries against the bruised twilight sky. But everything was coated in this weird sheen. Not rain or dew, but something more viscous and oily, reflecting streetlights back at me with a distorted shimmer that made them look like fractured mirrors hanging from wires strung between the skeletal branches. The Oakhaven Estates gate loomed ahead of me imposingly, the wrought iron archway appearing to twist into impossible angles through the broom. The guardhouse was dark, no flicker of light in any window, not even a single security camera blinking on. I rolled down my window to check for an intercom button, but there wasn't one. Just that oily sheen of fog or mist, thick enough to make the air itself feel heavy and slick against my skin. Then, the gate swung open with a groan of rusty hinges. Apparently the residents' HOA fees were not going towards maintaining it. I pulled through hesitantly, engine ticking louder in that sudden silence. The houses looked normal. Some windows glowing with an inner light, some dark, and some with only porch lights. The manicured lawns weren't just perfect, they were impossibly so. Blades of grass standing at rigid attention, even in the whistling air. I drove past one after another. McMansions with columns and porticos I hadn't noticed before, their paintwork gleaming like freshly polished bone under a sickly combination of moonlight, porch light, and my headlights as well. Each house had a car parked out front. Not just any car either. All of them were sleek black sedans identical to each other, except for tiny variations in chrome trim or hubcaps. Maybe the HOA rules were so detailed as to demand specific vehicles as well. I kept driving until I reached a house that was different. It wasn't quite as ostentatious as the others. Smaller even. More of a colonial than anything else. But it had several cars out front, and its lawn looked like every other one. Perfectly manicured, but somehow less vibrant under that pulsing white light spilling from within. This must have been where the party was. I pulled up to the curb, engine sighing with relief. I grabbed the pizza box, its surface now warm beneath my fingers, despite the chill air outside. As I reached for the doorbell, I instead found an ornate door knocker shaped like some kind of stylized lion head with ruby eyes. A single word floated out from behind the door before I could even knock. Finally! I looked over. The windows weren't just lit up, they were filled with faces pressed against the glass, all staring at me with identical expressions of relief and hunger. Not human faces exactly, but something that wore them like masks. Pale, gaunt things beneath skin, stretched taut over sharp cheekbones and brows drawn into perpetual furrows. Their eyes were black pits in those pallid visages, reflecting nothing back except for a faint flicker of the same pulsing white light I'd seen emanating from inside. And one of them, or maybe it was just the one closest to me, they all seemed to start blurring together into some kind of single entity with too many eyes and mouths. It reached out through the window, its long fingers tipped with unwashed fingernails that scraped against the glass like obsidian shards. The arms stretched and stretched. It didn't move towards the pizza box so much as reached through it, pulling at something unseen within the cardboard depths before letting go with a sigh of contentment. I stared down at the pizza box in my hands, the smiling caricature of a mustached Italian man, now slick and wet. Not just from condensation, but with some kind of oily sweat that pulsed faintly against my palm. And I knew, somehow, that this wasn't about garlic or hungry rich people anymore. It never had been. It was about something hungrier than any late-night craving on Staten Island could ever satisfy. Something that wore faces as masks and reached through cardboard to taste the offerings of a world it seemed determined to devour one greasy slice at a time. I tried to pull back, my hand jerking away from the box like it had suddenly become branded with hot iron. But something, a thin tendril of that oily sweat-slicked warmth, snagged on my thumb and held fast. I tugged at it reflexively, tearing loose a ragged strip of cardboard along with what felt like skin. It wasn't human skin, more rubbery, faintly translucent, stretched taut over something pulsing beneath like an iridescent beetle wing caught in amber. The pizza box began to open. Well, it wasn't so much opening as splitting apart along a seam I hadn't noticed before. Not from the top down, but like some kind of bizarre chrysalis cracking open sideways. The oily sheen pooled around its base in little rivulets that hissed softly against the blacktop street. And then it oozed out. Not pepperoni and mozzarella di bufala campagna anymore. Not even something vaguely resembling a pizza at this point. It was more a creature born from the greasy depths of melted cheese, bubbling San Marzano sauce, now congealed into some kind of slick carapace. The garlic bulb eye staring sightlessly upwards as it was dragged along by tendrils that writhed with an oily luminescence. Not quite alive, but somehow more than just animate. It stretched out from the box in a slow-motion wave, cresting over the rim and spilling onto my hand, where I still clutched that ragged strip of cardboard skin, pulling me forward like some kind of fleshy anchor as it slithered across the pavement towards the house with its lion door knocker. The faces in the window, they all began to sing, no longer pale and gaunt beneath stretched skin, but somehow more defined within the pulsing white light spilling from behind them. They sang a wordless hymn of hunger that seemed less like a melody, but more like some kind of vibration resonating in my teeth and chest bones. I wanted to scream. I did, truly. But it was like trying to shout underwater. My voice just came out as this choked gurgle, swallowed by the oily warmth spreading over my arm from where the pizza creature had first laid its tendrils upon me, slopping towards the ground with a sickening sucking sound that made every hair on my neck stand on end. The smell of cheese now repulsed me for the first time in my life, a sickly sweet reek clinging to the damp air. It pulsed with an oily heat against my skin, each beat sending tremors up my arm like tiny earthquakes. I couldn't see it anymore through the greasy curtain of shredded mozzarella that draped over my hand, but I could feel its molten core sloshing closer to my elbow. I wheezed, adrenaline finally kicking in after the initial shock had worn off. I clawed at the gooey mass with both hands, scraping against a surface like raw dough mixed with bone fragments. A chunk of pepperoni flaked loose and plopped onto the street. I continued clawing while violently thrashing the blob across my jacket zippers. The mozzarella curtain rippled and retreated momentarily, revealing a patch of glistening red sauce that bubbled angrily. I flapped my arm and flicked my hand towards the ground like a bullwhip until the mass began to loosen. With one last shuddering heave, it fell away from me in a limp heap of doughy appendages and congealed cheese. I was running to my car within seconds of being relieved of the pizza box and its contents, and did not stick around to witness the aftermath. The preceding account references an encounter with an event known as the Congealed Pie, which is triggered when specific geometric patterns are combined with specific ingredients and exposed to heat. The recipe for this event is to be stored within a standard lockbox in a hidden location. Access to the patterns is not to be revealed to the public. During experimentation, the congealed pie must be handled using non-conductive materials, such as nitrile gloves, and placed upon an inert substance of tempered glass or polished granite until the team is ready for heat to be applied. After experimentation, any paranormal instances are to be disposed of by freezing at a lower minimum temperature of at least -109 degrees Fahrenheit for a duration of 30 minutes, ensuring complete quenching of biological activity. The remaining document referencing the creation of the congealed pie shows a series of interconnected geometric patterns made from luxury ingredients, first assembled at a pizzeria on Staten Island. The patterns are composed primarily of stylized spirals made from pizza toppings rendered in black ink upon parchment paper, measuring approximately 20 centimeters by 30 centimeters each. The paranormal properties manifest when the ingredients are arranged in a specific configuration and cooked, for lack of a better term. When assembled according to an undocumented protocol involving both spatial arrangement and orientation relative to cardinal directions, the congealed pie induces the creation of anomalous pizzas, hereafter referred to as APs. These APs are indistinguishable from standard pepperoni pizza upon initial observation, but exhibit several anomalous properties as they change. Upon consumption, the constituent materials of an AP do not undergo typical digestion. Instead, they appear to integrate with the consumer's cellular structure, manifesting in subtle alterations to physiology and behavior. APs exhibit a significantly extended shelf life compared to standard pizzas, remaining edible for weeks without refrigeration or degradation. Consumption of an AP by human subjects consistently results in the manifestation of a pizza creature within approximately 24 hours. These creatures are amorphous entities composed primarily of congealed tomato sauce and melted cheese, exhibiting rudimentary sentience and possessing elongated tendrils tipped with sharp keratinous structures resembling claws. Pizza creatures exhibit predatory behavior towards organic matter, particularly human subjects, consuming them entirely over the course of several days. Analysis of tissue samples from individuals who have consumed APs reveals a gradual increase in cellular density and rigidity, accompanied by a paranormal proliferation of melanocytes, resulting in hyperpigmentation localized to areas exhibiting increased tactile sensitivity, such as on the fingertips and palms. Long-term exposure to APs appears to induce heightened olfactory acuity and an insatiable craving for processed cheese products. Preliminary research suggests that the geometric patterns comprising a congealed pie may represent a form of symbolic language used by an unknown extra-dimensional entity, or a collective consciousness with a predilection for pizza consumption. Further investigation into the origins and purpose of a congealed pie is ongoing.